Hello and welcome to our talk, Taking a Cricket Bat to Accessibility Barriers in Atomfall. I'm Duncan Bell, lead UI designer on Atomfall. I started my career in advertising, but my passion for games led me to work on Sniper Elite 5 and Evil Genius 2. Being colorblind myself, I'm passionate about designing UIs that are clear, accessible, and player-friendly.
And I'm Hannah O'Hare. I'm a senior technical UI designer on Atomfall. I've also previously worked in Sniper Elite 5 and studied game accessibility in university. In my work, I always consider how to design and implement with accessibility in mind to enable more players to play and enjoy games.
Atomfall is a survival action game inspired by real-life events, set 5 years after the Windscale nuclear disaster in northern England. Players explore a fictional quarantine zone, scavenging, crafting, bartering, fighting, and talking their way through a British countryside setting filled with bizarre characters, mysticism, cults, and rogue government agencies.
In today's talk, we are going to run through Atomfall's approach to accessibility and how it helped us make Rebellion's most accessible game yet. We'll start by taking a look at some of our standout features, discuss how they were made and how they could be improved. And then we'll finish with our lessons learned and key takeaways that could be applied to any project. This talk is pre-recorded, so any questions can be answered by the team on the GenConf Discord.
Let's kick off with our approach to accessibility. Kerry Waterton, our internal accessibility designer, created a framework to help lead accessibility initiatives across the company. This matrix helps each project to grow, while understanding that even the smallest step forward is still progress. Features were categorized into 3 groups. Maintain, which encompassed relevant features from previous games, helping to maintain studios' existing standards. Improve, which took some of those features and set new goals for them to aim towards. And expand, which looked to address the biggest barriers to match competitor titles, expanding the reach of the game.
But what did we actually do to support this approach? Firstly, we made accessibility a pillar of the game's design. This helped us holistically look at accessibility and how we could work with it to create an experience that matched our creative vision. The pillar Meaningful Accessibility helped us to adapt the game to match the player's individual needs through design and settings. We aligned ourselves with many external guidelines, including the Game Accessibility Guidelines and Xbox Accessibility Guidelines. These helped us ensure our features were meeting standards that are expected from the accessibility community. And lastly, they encapsulated our Maintain, Improve, Expand matrix, building upon relevant features from previous games.
To support each department and better weave accessibility into our processes, department-specific heuristics reference sheets were created. The intent was to create a short list of fundamentals that were easy to learn and served as a reference for both self-reviews and larger team reviews. On the right-hand side of the screen is an example of the UI heuristics poster. It covers aspects such as multi-sensory feedback, color usage, contrast considerations, as well as minimum text sizes.
Training was a natural step in enabling team members to more effectively test their own work. This included things like inclusive design workshops, using tools like Color Contrast Analyzer, and hosting talks and demos from accessibility advocates and charities to help give lived experience context. On the right of the screen is an example of a contrast checking tool, Accessibility Insights, which shows the contrast ratios for pale grey and charcoal grey. We had a specialised QA team that tested against our goals, external guidelines and accessibility tags. This happened throughout the development cycle to allow us to catch issues as early as possible. These reports focus on being actionable for the team. On the right of the screen we have an example of early reports highlighting the lack of backplates in the UI.
Communication was key in ensuring all departments stayed informed, which allowed us to build systems effectively together. Atomfall had dedicated accessibility meetings scheduled every 2 weeks, consisting of the project discipline leads and stakeholders. The main objective of this meeting was to review the progress and discuss feedback on upcoming features. These conversations often led to impromptu meetings, especially after in-person playthroughs. Lastly, and most importantly, we ran various events and workshops throughout development to test our work and gain actionable feedback. One of our biggest efforts was a consultancy day with the Wobbly Gamer. He played the game, gave us feedback on our features, and highlighted the barriers he faced while playing. His insights helped validate what we'd built and guided us in prioritizing the most important improvements to make with the time we had left.
So what were these features? As mentioned previously, we wanted to retain and keep features from previous games that would be applicable to Atomfall. This included things like accessibility on launch, where we present the most helpful features in the first time user setup, settings for aiming and sprint, the automatic traversal system we built in Sniper 5, camera options, and contextual tutorials that can also be accessed or reset at any time. For previous features, we also wanted to improve them by making them more robust so that they can continue to meet external guidelines.
On Alanfall, we continued to build on our text scaling and backplate system. We did this by applying our backplates everywhere to ensure better contrast throughout the UI. For text scaling, we also wanted to reach the text scaling guidelines set by Xbox, 104 pixels at 4K resolution. So we jumped in at the deep end here by allowing our text to immediately scale to 104 pixels. By working backwards like this let us see what fell apart and what needed fixing. This is a screenshot of gameplay where the player is looking at a telephone in a red phone box. They have a hatchet in their hand. In the top left corner is a player's current lead that they are tracking for the main story. In the top middle is the compass, and in the bottom right is their health bar. An interaction on the telephone reads, "Telephone, eat answer." All the text is large, and all text and UI elements have backplates behind them. This is a screenshot of the player's menu open on the backpack. There's a grid that the player has some items stored in and a list of ammo types using icons at the top. Above is a tab list for player menu, show map, investigations, backpack, crafting and skills. We found a few ways to help with text scaling, including the obvious solution of scroll boxes, but we also tried a few other things. Where screens didn't allow for scrolling because of a lack of input, we implemented auto-scrolling. We limited this to areas where information was on demand and had no time limits. We also introduced ticker tape style horizontal scrolling to accommodate large prompt trays in the footers. To minimize the impact of text scaling on our larger text elements like titles and headers, we decided to cap the maximum font size to 104 pixels. This sacrificed some of our visual hierarchy, but made for a more manageable implementation of text scaling all round. Our layouts also worked in our favour by still creating hierarchy through positioning and content grouping. In some areas, we changed tactics and used tooltips instead of a dedicated static area for text. This meant we could have information overlaying UI that was completely controlled by the player through toggles. Lastly, in some areas we used text scaling thresholds to change the layout of certain screens slightly. Similar to responsive resizing, this helped to better accommodate larger and smaller text sizes. On the inventory screen, this came into effect with tooltips, which changed width at certain thresholds, and the nearby prompt, which dynamically joins the ticker tape grouping of prompts at a certain text size. It's important to note that text scaling was retrofitted into the design for the most part, and we know there are some areas of improvement like avoiding narrow fit text and overlapping prompts with decorative elements. The backplates might also be improved by using a full screen backplate in menus like this, which can be more efficient for a workflow perspective and improve the visual presentation of the UI. For initial setup, our first screen launches at 200% text size to give players the best opportunity to be able to interact with the rest of the menus. If the game doesn't launch at this size, it might mean that someone who has low vision would need a sighted assistance to use text scaling sliders in the first place. Despite the fact that there are improvements, we are absolutely thrilled that our UI text scales to this size and we have backplates that are consistently throughout the UI. One unexpected benefit of implementing the text scale was the effect it had on localization. We only had a handful of updates that needed to be made for different languages, since our system had to be designed with flexibility in mind.
Making the UI colorblind accessible by default was a key goal for us throughout our accessibility testing. We focused on simplifying the information presented on screen to the player without relying on too many different colors. More importantly, we allow players to customize these colors using an expanded color picker. Here's an example screenshot from the game, showing the crafting screen in action. Since our game takes place in lush, natural environments, this red text used with the default color palette can be difficult for players with red-green color blindness to read. By allowing the player to change these colors, we ensure that key information remains clear and readable for everyone.
We also extend customization to our controls by allowing our keyboard remapping system to include gamepad and other devices. The whole system was rebuilt from the ground up by allowing for a host of upgrades, including the ability to bind up to 4 keys per action, set most actions to press or hold, support for multiple devices at once, and the ability to rebind both games and UI actions. Players can use presets as a jumping off point for rebinding. This way they don't have to start from a blank canvas. As this was a new system that was built from the ground up, we learned a lot and hope to continue to improve upon it in the future. We would have loved to swap action, but we found this could create chain clashes which were hard to manage, and a reset option per button. But this also had the same issue as swap. Special effects helped us with our controls by providing feedback on draft schemes. For example, they recommended that we do still provide one-handed control schemes, even though these require adaptive hardware, as many one-handed players have one-handed controllers, and presets like these provide a good starting point for players to configure them. We also gathered feedback from left-handed players on creating left-handed layouts for both gamepad and keyboard.
A big part of Atomfall is the freedom it gives to players to explore, progress, and approach challenges in their own way. You can take an aggressive approach, eliminating threats as you go, or play almost entirely non-lethally. Initially, for testing purposes, we grouped our accessibility features into individual presets alongside specific difficulty settings, but over time this evolved into the concept of our playstyles. While we offer a recommended experience, there is no wrong way to play. Instead, the game's core elements, combat, survival, and exploration, are separated into different presets, allowing players to shape their own unique experience. The game offers 5 playstyle options: Sightseer, Investigator, Brawler, Survivor, and Veteran. Our recommended experience is Survivor, giving harsh combat in an unforgiving world, but the other playstyles can provide very different experiences. Investigator has less focus on combat but more on exploration, whereas Brawler puts more focus on combat and less focus on exploration and survival. Sightseer provides an all-round assisted experience across all 3 areas of the game, and enables features such as the objective style markers and lead hints. Customization has always been at the heart of Rebellion's games, and players can tweak any of the playstyles to craft a more tailored experience that suits them. In this example, you can see the breakdown of the combat settings. It includes many of the customization options as seen in Sniper Elite 5, such as enemy accuracy and perception.
As well as being able to build on what we had, we also wanted to be able to create new features and options.
We ran some Copilot streams of Sniper Elite 5 with sightless gamers. Copilot is a term used for when 2 players control the same character. This is necessary in games that are not fully accessible to someone who is visually impaired. The Copilot player is a sighted player that can help with navigation or provide audio callouts to the other player to help them engage the audio. We noticed on stream that the games required a lot of callouts from the Copilot to enable the player with sight to perform basic interactions. We want to give more agency to these players without sight, so we paired audio cues with core game interactions, such as picking up items, opening doors, traversal points, and enemy takedowns. The hope is players that learn these cues can use them to perform actions without the need for callouts from a sighted player. Unique cues play from traversal points and interactions. Interactions can have either 1 prompt or 2 prompts, so there are 2 cues depending on the number of prompts. The sound cues are played when the player is within distance of interaction with the object, alongside the on-screen prompt. We'll play a short video to show this in action. The player approaches a traversal point. The player finds an item they can pick up. The player finds an item that they can pick up or consume.
To give further agency to visually impaired gamers, Atomfall features audio combat assistance. This concept was originally drafted by a systems designer, Vicky Boyce. After seeing a similar system added to Sea of Thieves, it allowed us to take learnings and build upon their implementation. One piece of feedback we saw from some players was that using a less diegetic sound would be beneficial to help players distinguish the sounds better. With this in mind, we chose to make our sounds more abstract. We initially tested this internally with our developers at an in-office event during Global Accessibility Awareness Day, which allowed our team to get hands-on and experience combat through audio alone. While not a replacement for testing with consultants, it was a great exercise for showcasing what we'd made and helped our developers get excited about the feature and to start thinking about other applications for feedback through audio alone. We then tested this feature with our subject matter experts, including Sightless Combat and Wobbly Gamer. Their feedback helped guide us to build a much stronger system. The audio-assisted combat includes 3 different settings which can be enabled or disabled separately to create a fully tailored experience for different levels of vision. The first option is passive NPC audio. This is audio that players hear from an NPC and is spatialized. This enables melee combat through constant looping sound, because whenever an enemy doesn't play a sound, it is essentially invisible to the player without sight. Here is a short video of a player approaching an NPC with this option enabled. The second feature is audio aiming cues. Audio aiming cues can be enabled to create ticks when the player is aiming down sights. These ticking sounds change in frequency and pitch depending on where the character is aiming in relation to the target. Pitch relates to the vertical alignment of a target and plays low if the player is below the target, and high if they are above the target. These ticks play more frequently depending on the horizontal alignment to the target. The audio changes to a different repeating sound when the player is on target. Here is a short video of the player aiming near and then over a target using these cues. The last feature is Snap Aim. This can be enabled with or without cues. Snap aiming with cues means that a unique cue is played when the player snaps onto and off of an enemy. Here is a short video of the Snap Aim cues in action as the player aims, snaps onto and then off a target. All three of these cues work together. Here is a short video of the player using all three to aim at and off of an enemy. Atomfall has you piecing together notes and clues to discover the mystery of the Windscale plant. By default, the game has a very hands-off approach to enable players to explore at their own pace and not feel pressured to complete leads in a certain order or set time. However, we recognize this hands-off experience isn't for everyone. The exploration settings include a few options to assist players. Flag leads, which will highlight main story quests in the player's notebook, waypoint markers, which add markers to the compass that point to the objective, as well as navigational hints, which provide clear, simple summaries of core information found in leads. This screen shows the player's notebook. On the left is a list of the player's open leads, which currently contains the interchange and Dr. Garrow. The flagging leads option is on, which has marked both leads with the main story tag to indicate that these are core story leads. On the right-hand side of the screen shows the currently selected lead, a radio transcript from a character detailing their helicopter crash somewhere in Castafel Woods. Navigational hints are enabled, so the top of the note provides a summary, giving the player a nudge of what to do next. In the example it reads, go to coordinates 25 east, 88 north in Castafel Woods to investigate the helicopter crash.
From doing streams with Wobbly, we found out that he really found the Sniper Elite tagging system very helpful as the UI was so high contrast. Atomfall doesn't have this feature, so we decided to add the option Enemy Indicators. This option adds an icon above enemies that change colour and visuals depending on how threatened the enemy is by the player. This not only helps visually impaired players, but can help players know when there is someone behind them if they cannot hear footsteps, attacks, or barks. It also helps to flag the level of threat the NPC is in, giving an alternative to the more abstract radial indicators. Here's a video of the indicators in action in which the player moves around an area with some outlaws.
Nice and slow now. Let's have no trouble. Best keep a lookout just in case.
To go alongside the enemy indicators, we built subtitle indicators which show both direction and distance of dialogue. This gives players who are playing with limited audio more information on where dialogue and barks are coming from. The direction is shown through the arrowhead, and the distance is through to the tail length. We used dots for the tail, which we found much quicker to process than a line. You can visually see 1 to 3 dots depending on the distance. After our consistency session with the Wobbly Gamer, we discovered a key part of our survival system. Deciding whether or not to engage with enemies was lacking from our suite of features for someone with low vision. Despite the fact that our audio combat assistance was enabling combat, Wobbly found himself ambushed again and again because the enemies didn't always stand out. We fixed this with a feature that provided high contrast overlays on the NPCs, with separate colour options for hostile and non-hostile. Again, we provide almost 100 colours to choose from. On the screen there are 2 side-by-side gameplay screenshots. On the screenshot on the left, the player looks towards a ruined building where a trader stands by a campfire. They are completely highlighted in pale yellow, which contrasts them greatly from the environment. On the screenshot on the right, the player crouches in a bush, and ahead, near a ruined stone wall, is a group of outlaws. They are all completely highlighted in bright pink, which also contrasts them greatly from the environment.
Lastly, we want to highlight some of the approaches we took to weave accessibility into our design approach so that we're not just relying on the options to support the needs of players. We believe that a strong combination of options and accessibility by design helps to create adaptive and accessible experiences. To assist with enemy readability issues that Wobbly highlighted, we had a number of stylistic choices that helped enemies stand out more in the environment. This included the glowing elements on ferals, which helped identify them in dark areas, and bright glowing eyes on the rat swarms. Red clothing accents and white face paint were added to the outdoors to create stronger contrast. The barred robots have a large shape and silhouette, and the flamethrower robots, the red canisters, are highly contrasted from their black body armor, which helps identify weak points. Ensuring readability of item pickups was also a key consideration. This outline color can be customized, and an interactive dot is shown when the player is at a distance. While consulting, Wobbly commented that this UI made me actually want to explore and find everything, which showed us we were working towards our goal of enabling players to explore the world. We knew from Copilot streams that our audio team did a fantastic job with unique pickup sounds in Sniper Elite. Building on that discovery, the team went above and beyond with building informative audio naturally in the world. This expanded from pickup sounds to things like swarm audio with telegraphing for attacks, unique sounds for gaining and losing status effects, and clear audio for triggering traps. Our barks also telegraph attack types, and on the right side of the screen is an outlaw reaching to grab a Molotov with the subtitle, "Where? Take cover." During playtesting, we found many players would find places of interest or areas they would like to revisit when they were better equipped. Adding the ability to place stamps on the map allowed players to be more actively involved with their exploration, instead of relying solely on memory. It was a collaborative effort across the teams to define a list of icons that were helpful for players in the context of the game, but also versatile enough for different uses. The ability to zoom in on the map allowed for more granularity for map stamp placement, without obscuring too many map details such as walkable paths.
Following feedback from Antonio Martinez, who did a talk for us in Sniper Elite 5, and its accessibility from a modability standpoint, we want to focus on how to make our controls more accessible by default. We were able to create a set of controls that by default supports no holes in gamepad, and single stick playthrough that had automatic movement options. Contextual actions were key here. These are actions that are only available in certain contexts. This helped us double up on keys without clashes and ultimately created a smoother player experience as there was less keys presses to remember. We also created unbound actions, which were keys for things we thought could be helpful to a player but didn't fit with the core scheme. This included a check ammo action. We achieved a whole lot with Atomfall, but what were the lessons we learned and key takeaways from the project for accessibility?
Firstly, comparing the maintain, improve, expand list from the start of accessibility development to the actual list of achieved goals, it was a resounding success. We did everything and more than we wanted to achieve. We didn't limit ourselves to the original maintain, improve, expand list, because game development isn't linear. We added to it as barriers arose, as the game developed, and we received lived experience feedback. This is one of the ways that we were able to do so much, by being flexible and open to tackling more as the team's confidence with accessibility arose. The things that worked best for us were clear communication, including regular accessibility meetings. This helped departments stay aware of progress. Scoping of accessibility based on impact and cost was vital, and having regular testing through QA to give us guidance on what tags and guidelines we were missing or near to really helped with analysing impact. Consultancy with Wobbly and testing with people with lived experience validated the features that we made and highlighted areas of improvement. It gave us focus and more fuel to push for features. Accessibility feedback on other games is also valuable, as shown through our control improvements and some of the feedback gathered from accessibility streams of Sniper. Supporting champions in the team helped to spread the load and make accessibility part of everyone's work. From the narrative doing the hints, to art increasing the default readability of enemies. Collaborating with our engine team was crucial for robust core features like remapping. Working together, we were able to get a system and identify areas of improvement as we went, and created something with much more control for players.
One big takeaway from this project is how valuable early planning can be. Although we were able to implement many new accessibility features, small oversights made early on in the project would have been identified if we had an accessibility designer involved from the start. Building up the backlog as early as possible paves the runway for features to be visible across the team and allows each department to take ownership and consider the implementation alongside their feature work. Another learning for us was the value of bringing consultants in to review the features earlier in development. It was the most valuable feedback we received from an accessibility perspective, but we were limited by time because it happened quite late in our development cycle. It meant there were minimal big changes we could make. The best feedback we got was from testing work-in-progress features, as it gave us additional insights and meant we could adapt easily. Playing our games on stream or Copilot with disabled gamers also highlights their experiences and helped us to understand the barriers they face.
The leap forward in Atomfall's accessibility is a triumph. Overall, Atomfall has achieved outstanding new standards for accessibility at the studio. These features were fueled by the hard work and drive of the entire team, not just one individual.
If you'd like to read more about accessibility in Atomfall, you can visit the Atomfall website or the accessibility section on the Rebellion website. Thank you for listening, and thank you so much to GACon for having us. We hope that there's something here you can take from this talk to enable more people to play and to help you take a cricket bat to the barriers in your game.